Sarah Martinez stepped off the military transport bus at Fort Braxton with dust on her boots and determination in her heart. The other recruits rushed past her, eager to make good impressions on their first day at the elite training facility. Sarah took her time, adjusting the strap of her worn duffel bag and looking around at the sprawling base that would be her home for the next 6 months. The morning sun cast long shadows across the parade ground where drill sergeants were already barking orders at groups of trainees. Sarah had dreamed of this moment since she was 12 years old, watching her grandfather's old war movies in their small farmhouse kitchen. Now, at 22, she was finally here, ready to prove that a girl from rural Kansas could stand with the best soldiers in the country. Well, well, what do we have here? The voice belonged to Marcus Webb, a tall recruit from New York City who had been bragging about his family's military connections during the entire bus ride. He looked Sarah up and down with obvious disdain. Did someone's farm girl get lost on her way to a county fair? Several other recruits gathered around, snickering at Marcus's joke. Sarah kept her expression neutral, having learned long ago not to react to such comments. Growing up in a town of 800 people had taught her that actions spoke louder than words, and she planned to let her performance do all the talking. "I'm Sarah Martinez," she said simply, extending her hand toward Marcus. "Looking forward to training with all of you." Marcus ignored her outstretched hand. "Martinez, huh? Let me guess, your daddy grows corn and your mama bakes pies for the church social. This isn't summer camp, sweetheart. This is where real soldiers are made." The group laughed again, but Sarah noticed that not everyone was joining in. A quiet young man named David Kim stood at the edge of the circle, watching the interaction with uncomfortable eyes. Another recruit, Jessica Chen, rolled her eyes at Marcus's behavior and walked away, clearly having no patience for his attitude. "Actually," Sarah replied calmly, "my father runs a precision agriculture operation with over 3,000 acres. My mother is a nurse practitioner who serves 5 counties, and I graduated summa cum laude with degrees in engineering and tactical studies. But you're right about one thing, this isn't summer camp." The laughter died down as Sarah's words sank in. Marcus's face reddened slightly, but he wasn't ready to back down. "Book smarts don't mean much when bullets start flying, farm girl. Let's see how tough you are when you're carrying a 60-pound pack through 20 miles of mud." Sarah smiled. "I've been carrying hay bales since I was 10 and helping birth calves in January snowstorms since I was 12. I think I can handle whatever they throw at us here." Before Marcus could respond, a sharp whistle cut through the air. "Listen up, maggots," Drill Sergeant Rodriguez's voice boomed across the parade ground. "Get your sorry BACKSIDES over here on the double. Move, move, move." The group of recruits scrambled toward the formation area, with Sarah keeping pace easily despite her heavy bag. She had run 5 miles every morning since high school, often before dawn to help with farm chores. Her legs were strong from years of physical work, and her lungs were clear from breathing country air instead of city smog. As they fell into line, Sergeant Rodriguez began his welcome speech. He was a compact man with steel-gray hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. His uniform was perfectly pressed, and his bearing commanded immediate respect. "You think you're hot stuff because you made it through basic training," he said, packing slowly in front of the formation. "You think you're ready to call yourselves soldiers. Well, let me tell you something, basic training was kindergarten compared to what you're about to experience here. This is the Advanced Combat Training Institute, where we separate the wheat from the chaff, the warriors from the wannabes." Sarah stood at attention, her posture straight and her eyes focused ahead. She had practiced this stance countless times in her bedroom mirror, determined to be ready for this moment. "Some of you will wash out in the first week," Rodriguez continued. "Others might make it a month before they realize they don't have what it takes. A very few of you will complete this program and earn the right to join America's elite fighting forces. The question is, which one are you?" The sergeant's gaze swept across the formation, lingering for a moment on each recruit. When his eyes met Sarah's, she thought she saw a flicker of something, approval, perhaps, or recognition of her serious intent. "Your first test begins now," Rodriguez announced. "Full gear, 20-mile hike through the obstacle course and surrounding terrain. Anyone who can't complete it in under 6 hours will be on a bus home tonight. Fall out and get your equipment." The recruits scattered to collect their gear from a nearby supply station. Sarah quickly strapped on her pack, adjusted her weapon, and checked her boots one final time. The pack was indeed heavy, closer to 70 pounds than 60, but she had carried heavier loads during harvest season. Marcus appeared beside her, struggling slightly with his own pack. "Hope you said goodbye to your cows this morning," he muttered, "because you'll be back to milking them by tomorrow." "I don't have cows," Sarah replied cheerfully. "We raise soybeans and corn, much more efficient use of land resources in our climate zone." Her technical response seemed to irritate Marcus even more. But before he could say anything else, Sergeant Rodriguez blew his whistle and the formation began moving out. The first few miles were deceptively easy, following well-maintained roads around the base perimeter. Sarah settled into a comfortable rhythm, her breathing steady and her pace consistent. She had learned long ago that endurance was about maintaining sustainable effort, not burning out early with unnecessary speed. Around mile 5, they entered the forest obstacle course. Rope climbs, wall scaling, belly crawls through mud, and balance beams over water hazards tested every aspect of physical fitness and mental determination. Sarah approached each obstacle methodically, using technique rather than brute strength whenever possible. At the rope climb, she wrapped her legs properly and pulled herself up hand over hand, reaching the top while Marcus was still struggling at the halfway point. During the wall scaling exercise, she helped boost David Kim over a particularly tall barrier, earning a grateful nod from the smaller recruit. "Looking strong, Martinez," called out Jessica Chen as they regrouped after the mud crawl. Sarah's face was streaked with dirt, but she was breathing normally while several other recruits were already showing signs of fatigue. The middle portion of the hike took them through dense forest trails that twisted and turned through rocky terrain. Here, Sarah's outdoor experience became even more valuable. She could read the land, anticipating where the trail would be rocky or where soft ground might slow their progress. Her farm-trained balance helped her navigate fallen logs and stream crossings that caused others to stumble. Marcus, meanwhile, was beginning to struggle. His city-soft feet were developing blisters in boots that hadn't been properly broken in. His breathing was becoming labored, and sweat poured down his face despite the cool morning air. "Maybe you should have spent more time hiking and less time talking," David Kim said quietly as he passed Marcus on a particularly steep section of trail. By mile 15, the formation had stretched out considerably. Sarah was near the front, moving steadily with a group of the strongest performers. Jessica Chen kept pace beside her, along with two male recruits named Thompson and Rodriguez, no relation to the drill sergeant. Behind them, the struggling recruits were falling further back. The final 5 miles included the most challenging obstacles: a river crossing with a rope bridge, a steep rock wall that required actual climbing skills, and a series of trenches that had to be navigated while carrying a wounded casualty. Actually, a weighted dummy that added another 40 pounds to their load. At the river crossing, Sarah studied the rope bridge carefully before starting across. The ropes were slick with morning dew, and the water below was cold and deep. She moved deliberately, testing each handhold and foot placement. Halfway across, she heard a splash behind her. Marcus had lost his footing and fallen into the river. He surfaced, sputtering and clearly shaken. The water was chest-deep and moving fast enough to be dangerous for someone in full gear. Without hesitation, Sarah turned around and began working her way back across the bridge. "What are you doing?" Thompson called out. "You'll lose time." Sarah ignored him and positioned herself directly above where Marcus was struggling in the water. "Grab my hand," she called down. "I'll pull you up." Marcus looked up at her with surprise and something that might have been gratitude. He reached up, and Sarah grasped his wrist, using her leg strength to help haul him back onto the bridge platform. "Why did you help me?" Marcus asked, water dripping from his gear. "I've been nothing but nasty to you all morning." Sarah shrugged. "Because that's what soldiers do. We don't leave anyone behind." They completed the crossing together, with Sarah staying close in case Marcus needed help again. The gesture cost her several minutes, but she quickly made up the time on the rock wall, where her farm-developed upper body strength allowed her to scale the cliff face faster than almost anyone else in the group. The casualty carry was the final test. Each recruit had to transport the weighted dummy through a series of trenches and obstacles, simulating the rescue of a wounded teammate under fire. Sarah lifted the dummy in a fireman's carry, settling the weight across her shoulders in a position she had practiced countless times with injured calves and sheep back home. The trenches were narrow and deep, forcing her to crawl and scramble while maintaining her grip on the heavy load. Her knees and elbows scraped against rocks and roots, but she kept moving forward. The dummy seemed to get heavier with each obstacle, but Sarah's determination never wavered. In the final trench, she caught up with Jessica Chen, who was struggling with her own casualty load. "Need help?" Sarah offered. Jessica shook her head, breathing hard but still determined. "I can do it, thanks though." They emerged from the trenches together and found themselves on the final stretch, a half-mile sprint across the parade ground to the finish line. Sarah's legs felt like lead, and her lungs burned, but she could see the end now. Sergeant Rodriguez stood at the finish line with a stopwatch, his expression unreadable. Sarah crossed the line with a time of 5 hours and 43 minutes. Jessica finished just seconds behind her, followed by Thompson and the younger Rodriguez. David Kim completed the course at 5 hours and 58 minutes, having pushed himself beyond what anyone thought he was capable of. Marcus stumbled across the finish line with just 30 seconds to spare, his face pale but his eyes bright with the knowledge that he had completed something he wasn't sure he could do. Several other recruits weren't as fortunate. They straggled in over the 6-hour limit and were quietly directed toward a different bus. "Not bad for a first day," Sergeant Rodriguez said as the successful recruits gathered around him. "You've proven you can handle the physical requirements. Tomorrow we start finding out if you can handle everything else." As the group dispersed toward their barracks assignments, Marcus approached Sarah. His earlier arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked like respect. "Thank you," he said simply, "for helping me at the river. I wouldn't have made it without you." Sarah nodded. "We're all on the same team here. The sooner we figure that out, the better we'll all do." That evening, as Sarah unpacked her gear in the barracks she would share with Jessica Chen and 4 other female recruits, she reflected on the day. The physical challenges had been demanding but manageable. The real test would be proving that her farm girl background was an asset, not a liability. She pulled out a small photo of her family's farm, rolling fields stretching to the horizon under a vast Kansas sky. Her parents had worried about her decision to join the military, but they had also raised her to pursue her dreams with determination and integrity. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them. The next morning brought their first taste of tactical training. The recruits were divided into squads and given a series of mission scenarios to complete. Sarah found herself assigned to a team with Marcus, David, Jessica, and 2 other recruits named Patterson and Williams. Their first exercise was a simulated reconnaissance mission. The squad had to infiltrate a mock enemy camp, gather intelligence, and extract without being detected. It sounded simple in theory, but the instructors had set up a complex scenario with multiple challenges. "Okay, farm girl," Marcus said as they studied the terrain map. "What do you think?" Sarah was surprised by his tone, respectful rather than mocking. She studied the map carefully, noting the positions of guard posts, patrol routes, and potential hiding spots. "The obvious approach is from the north," she said, pointing to a clear path through the trees. "But they'll expect that. Look here, there's a drainage ditch that runs along the eastern perimeter. It's probably muddy and uncomfortable, but it would give us concealment almost all the way to the target building." David nodded. "That's smart. What about extraction?" Sarah traced a route with her finger. "We could use the same ditch to get out, but that might be too predictable if they spot our entry point. Better to exit through this wooded area to the west. It's rougher terrain, but harder for them to follow." Jessica studied the plan. "What if we get separated?" "Rally point here," Sarah indicated a spot on the map. "It's defensible, has good sight lines, and multiple escape routes." Marcus looked at the plan and nodded slowly. "Okay, I'm convinced, but what makes you so sure about reading terrain like this?" Sarah smiled. "Have you ever tried to track down a missing calf in 300 acres of pasture? Same principles, think like your target, use natural concealment, and always have a backup plan." The mission began at dawn. Sarah's route planning proved accurate. The drainage ditch was indeed muddy and uncomfortable, but it provided excellent concealment as they made their way toward the target. The squad moved in careful formation, with Sarah taking point due to her demonstrated skill at reading the ground. At the target building, they discovered the intelligence they needed to gather was more complex than expected. Instead of simply photographing documents, they had to solve a puzzle that required input from multiple team members. Sarah's engineering background helped her understand the technical aspects, while David's computer skills were crucial for accessing the data. The extraction proved even more challenging when they discovered that the enemy had detected their presence and was actively hunting for them. Instead of following either of the planned routes, Sarah made a quick decision to lead them through a swampy area that would slow pursuit but provide better concealment. "This is disgusting," Patterson muttered as they slogged through knee-deep marsh water. "Better disgusting than captured," Sarah replied, keeping her voice low. "Besides, it'll throw off the tracking dogs." Her instinct proved correct. They reached the rally point without detection, having successfully completed their first tactical mission. The instructors seemed impressed, particularly with Sarah's adaptive thinking and terrain reading skills. The weeks that followed brought increasingly complex challenges. Combat scenarios, weapons training, advanced physical conditioning, leadership exercises, and psychological testing pushed every recruit to their limits. Sarah continued to excel, but more importantly, she began to earn genuine respect from her fellow trainees. Marcus, in particular, underwent a dramatic change in attitude. The city boy who had mocked her rural background began seeking her advice on everything from land navigation to survival skills. Their initial antagonism evolved into mutual respect and eventually genuine friendship. "You know," he said one evening as they cleaned their weapons after a long day of training, "I owe you an apology, a big one. I judged you based on ignorant stereotypes, and I was completely wrong." Sarah looked up from her rifle maintenance. "Apology accepted, but what changed your mind?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Watching you work, seeing how you think through problems, how you help other people, how you never give up even when things get really tough. I've never met anyone like you." "There are plenty of people like me," Sarah replied. "You just have to look past the surface to see them." As the training program entered its final phase, the competition became increasingly intense. Only the top performers would be selected for the elite units they all hoped to join. Sarah consistently ranked at or near the top in every category, but she knew that success would ultimately depend on more than individual performance. The final exercise was a week-long field training event that would test everything they had learned. Squads would be given complex mission scenarios and evaluated on their ability to work together under extreme stress. Sarah's team had evolved into a tight-knit unit with complementary skills and unshakable trust in each other. On the morning of the final exercise, as they prepared their gear and reviewed their initial mission briefing, Sarah felt a quiet confidence. She had proven that a country girl could not only survive elite military training but excel at it. More importantly, she had learned that true strength came not from where you were born or how you were raised, but from your willingness to work hard, help others, and never give up on your dreams. The final test was about to begin, and Sarah Martinez was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The final week of training began before dawn with the sound of helicopters thundering overhead. Sarah jerked awake in her bunk, immediately alert despite having been asleep for only 4 hours. The intensive preparation for this culminating exercise had pushed all the recruits to their physical and mental limits, but Sarah felt ready. "Final field exercise begins now," Sergeant Rodriguez's voice boomed through the barracks loudspeaker. "All squads report to the armory in 15 minutes. Full combat gear. This is not a drill." Sarah rolled out of her bunk and began the practiced routine of getting into full gear. Around her, the other members of her squad were doing the same with efficient, silent movements. Over the past months, they had evolved from a collection of strangers into a cohesive unit that functioned like a well-oiled machine. Marcus checked his weapon and ammunition while David verified their communication equipment. Jessica organized their medical supplies, and Patterson double-checked their navigation gear. Williams, their heavy weapons specialist, was already suited up and ready to go. Each team member knew their role and executed it without needing instructions. "Remember," Sarah said as they made final preparations, "this week determines everything. All the training, all the hard work, it comes down to how we perform over the next 7 days." The squad nodded grimly. They all knew what was at stake. Only the top-performing teams would earn placement in the special operations units they had all worked so hard to join. Everyone else would be assigned to regular military positions, which weren't bad careers but weren't what they had dreamed of achieving. At the armory, Sergeant Rodriguez handed each squad leader a sealed envelope containing their mission briefings. Sarah had been chosen as her squad's leader after consistently demonstrating tactical thinking and the ability to make quick decisions under pressure. It was an honor that came with enormous responsibility. "Listen carefully," Rodriguez said to the assembled squad leaders. "You have 1 week to complete a series of interconnected missions in a hostile environment. You will be tested on tactics, teamwork, adaptability, and leadership under extreme stress. Some scenarios will require combat operations. Others will test your ability to work with civilian populations or handle humanitarian crises. All of it will be as realistic as we can make it without actual bullets flying." He paused to let that sink in. The training area covers 50 square miles of varied terrain. Weather services are predicting storms, temperature swings, and limited visibility. You'll have access to standard field rations and whatever water you can find and purify. Medical support will be available for true emergencies, but minor injuries and discomfort are part of the experience. Sarah felt a familiar tingle of excitement mixed with nervousness. This was what she had trained for, the chance to prove that all her preparation and determination had been worth it. "One final note," Rodriguez continued. "You are being observed at all times by evaluation teams using advanced surveillance technology. Every decision you make, every action you take, every word you speak will be recorded and analyzed. Some of you will rise to the occasion, others will crack under pressure. We'll find out which category each of you falls into." The squad leaders were dismissed to brief their teams and move out to their starting positions. Sarah gathered her squad in a quiet corner of the armory and opened their mission envelope. Inside were detailed maps of their operational area and a complex scenario that would unfold over multiple phases. "Okay, team," she said, spreading the materials on a table. "Our first objective is to establish a forward operating base in this sector." She pointed to an area of dense forest marked on the map. "From there, we'll receive additional mission tasking. The scenario assumes we're operating in a foreign country where the local government has collapsed and various hostile factions are competing for control." David studied the terrain features. "Looks like challenging country, lots of elevation changes, water obstacles, and limited road access." "Perfect for what we've been training for," Jessica added. "Remote operations with minimal support." Marcus nodded. "What's our transportation situation?" Sarah consulted the briefing documents. "We get dropped off at this landing zone and proceed on foot from there. No vehicle support unless we can acquire and maintain our own transportation through mission accomplishments." Williams examined the map more closely. "That's a 15-mile hike through rough terrain just to reach our initial objective. With full gear, it'll take most of the first day." "Then we better get moving," Sarah said, folding up the maps. "Intelligence reports suggest hostile activity throughout the area, so we'll need to stay alert from the moment we leave the helicopter." 20 minutes later, their squad was loaded into a military helicopter with 3 other teams. Sarah found herself seated next to Captain Morrison, one of the senior instructors who would be observing and evaluating their performance. Morrison was a weathered special operations veteran with multiple combat deployments and a reputation for being impossible to impress. "Nervous, Martinez?" Morrison asked as the helicopter lifted off. "Excited, sir," Sarah replied honestly. "This is what we've been preparing for." Morrison studied her for a moment. "Your team has shown consistent improvement throughout the training program, but field exercises have a way of revealing things that don't show up in classroom scenarios. How do you think you'll handle the pressure when things don't go according to plan?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "Sir, growing up on a farm taught me that things rarely go according to plan. Weather changes, equipment breaks, animals get sick, markets fluctuate. The key is staying flexible and adapting to whatever reality presents you with. And if members of your team start breaking down under stress, then it's my job to help them through it," Sarah said without hesitation. "We succeed together or we fail together. There's no in-between." Morrison nodded approvingly. "We'll see if you still feel that way after a few days of limited sleep and constant pressure." The helicopter dropped them off in a clearing surrounded by dense forest. As the aircraft departed, leaving them alone in the wilderness, Sarah felt the full weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. For the next week, the success or failure of her team would depend largely on her decisions and leadership. "Perimeter watch," she ordered quietly. 2-minute security halt while we get our bearings. The squad automatically formed a defensive circle, each member watching a different sector for potential threats. Sarah used the time to orient herself with the map and compass, confirming their exact location and planning the route to their first objective. The terrain was challenging from the start. Steep hills covered with thick undergrowth made movement slow and exhausting. Sarah set a steady pace that would conserve energy while still making good progress. She rotated the point position among team members, ensuring that no one person bore the full burden of navigation and threat detection. After 3 hours of movement, they encountered their first test. A simulated roadblock operated by hostile forces blocked the most direct route to their objective. Sarah called a halt and gathered her team for a quick planning session. "We could try to go around," David suggested, studying the map. "Add maybe 4 hours to our movement, but avoid contact." "Or we could take them head-on," Williams offered. "Quick assault, neutralize the threat, continue mission." Sarah considered both options. What's the mission priority here, speed of movement or avoiding casualties? Marcus pulled out the briefing papers. Says here that stealth and avoiding detection are preferred when possible. This is supposed to be a reconnaissance and intelligence-gathering operation, not a direct action mission. "Then we go around," Sarah decided. "Williams, you take point. Find us a route through those hills that keeps us clear of the road but doesn't add more than necessary to our timeline." The detour proved more challenging than expected. The alternative route took them through swampy ground that slowed their progress and made noise discipline nearly impossible. Twice they had to stop and hide when aircraft passed overhead, uncertain whether the planes were friendly or hostile. By the time they reached their designated area for establishing a forward operating base, it was nearly dark, and the entire team was exhausted. Sarah selected a defensible position on high ground with good visibility and access to water. The squad set up camp with practiced efficiency, establishing security, camouflaging their position, and organizing their equipment. "Not bad for day one," Jessica said as they shared cold rations for dinner. "We're on schedule and haven't been detected." "Don't get overconfident," Sarah warned. "The first day is always the easiest, they're just getting us warmed up." Her prediction proved accurate. At 200 hours, they were awakened by the sound of simulated artillery fire. Red flares burst overhead, indicating that their position was under attack. Sarah immediately ordered the team to their predetermined emergency positions and began implementing their rehearsed response procedures. "Simulated chemical attack," came an announcement over the training loudspeakers. "Don protective masks immediately." The squad fumbled for their protective equipment in the darkness, struggling to put on gas masks while maintaining security and preparing to move their position. Sarah's voice came through the mask radio, muffled but clear. "Emergency displacement. Move to alternate position Bravo, 60-second movement." They gathered essential equipment and moved quickly through the forest to a backup position they had identified during their initial reconnaissance. The simulated attack continued for another hour, with flares, smoke, and sound effects creating a realistic sense of being under fire. When the exercise finally ended, the exhausted squad found themselves far from their original position, with some of their equipment lost or damaged during the hasty movement. Sarah realized this was exactly the kind of challenge the instructors wanted to present. How would they adapt when their careful plans were disrupted by unexpected events? "Equipment inventory," she ordered. "What do we still have and what did we lose?" The assessment was sobering. They had lost some of their food supplies, one of their radios was damaged, and David had injured his ankle during the movement in darkness. Not serious problems individually, but collectively they represented the kind of cascading challenges that could derail an entire mission if not managed properly. "Okay," Sarah said after reviewing their situation. "We adapt. David, how's the ankle?" "Painful but functional," David replied. "I can still move, just not as fast as usual." "Jessica, what's your assessment from a medical standpoint?" Jessica examined David's ankle carefully. "Sprained but not broken. He should avoid heavy loads and difficult terrain if possible." Sarah nodded and pulled out the maps. "Change of plans. We'll modify our route selection to avoid the most challenging terrain. Williams, you're now our primary radio operator since David's equipment was damaged. Marcus, you and I will split David's pack weight between us." What about the mission timeline? Patterson asked. We're already behind schedule. We make up time by moving more efficiently, Sarah replied. Better route planning, shorter rest stops, better movement techniques, but we don't sacrifice safety or leave anyone behind. The second day brought a new set of challenges in the form of a humanitarian assistance scenario. Their new mission tasking required them to locate and assist a group of simulated refugees who were reportedly hiding in the forest after fleeing from hostile forces. The scenario was designed to test their ability to work with civilian populations while maintaining operational security. Finding the refugees proved more difficult than expected. The instructor actors playing the refugee roles had been given realistic backgrounds and motivations, and they were genuinely fearful and suspicious of the military personnel. Sarah quickly realized that a direct, aggressive approach would fail completely. "Let me try something," she said to her team as they observed the refugee camp from a concealed position. "Marcus, you and Williams provide overwatch. Everyone else comes with me, but weapons slung and hands visible. We approach slowly and openly." She walked into the refugee camp with her hands raised, speaking in calm, clear tones. "We're here to help. We know you've been through something terrible, and we want to make sure you're safe." The lead refugee actor and instructor playing the role of a village elder responded with suspicion. "You are soldiers. Soldiers brought this war to our homes. Why should we trust you?" Sarah sat down on a log, making herself less intimidating. "Because some soldiers fight to destroy and others fight to protect. We're here to protect. What do you need most right now?" The conversation that followed revealed the complexity of real-world military operations. The refugees needed medical attention, food, and safe passage to a location outside the conflict zone. But they also had information about hostile force movements that could be valuable for military planning. Sarah had to balance humanitarian concerns with intelligence-gathering requirements. "We can provide immediate medical care," she offered, "and we have some food to share, but we need to understand what threats you've seen in this area so we can keep all of us safe." Jessica stepped forward with their medical kit and began treating a child actor who was playing the role of an injured refugee. Her gentle, professional manner helped establish trust with the group. Meanwhile, Sarah gathered intelligence about enemy positions and movement patterns, information that would be crucial for their next mission phase. The refugee assistance scenario concluded successfully, but it cost them valuable time and resources. Sarah's decision to share some of their food supplies with the refugees was evaluated positively by the observing instructors, but it left her team with reduced rations for the remainder of the week. "Good call on the humanitarian approach," Marcus said as they moved away from the refugee camp toward their next objective. "Those actors were really committed to their roles." "The real thing would be even more challenging," Sarah replied. "When people have genuinely suffered trauma and loss, earning their trust requires patience and compassion, not just military authority." Day 3 brought their most challenging scenario yet, a complex combat operation that required precise coordination and split-second decision-making. Intelligence reports indicated that a high-value target was being held prisoner in a heavily guarded compound. Sarah's team was tasked with conducting a rescue operation under strict rules of engagement. The compound was actually an elaborate training facility with instructor actors playing the roles of guards and prisoners. The guards carried simulation weapons that could kill or wound the rescue team if proper tactics weren't employed. The prisoner was an instructor playing the role of a captured pilot who had valuable intelligence. Sarah spent hours studying the compound layout and developing a detailed assault plan. The facility was well designed to test every aspect of small unit tactics: multiple buildings, defensive positions, guard rotations, and civilian personnel who couldn't be harmed during the operation. "This is going to require perfect timing," she explained to her team as they conducted final preparations. "Jessica and David establish overwatch positions here and here. Marcus and Williams approach from the north, while Patterson and I come in from the south. The guard rotation pattern gives us a 4-minute window when the back of the compound is minimally defended." The team studied aerial photos and a detailed terrain model of the target area. Every member knew their specific role, the timing of each phase, and multiple contingency plans if things went wrong. "What if the prisoner is injured or unable to move quickly?" David asked. "Then we adapt," Sarah replied. Primary extraction route is back the way we came. Alternate route is through the eastern fence if we take casualties or get pinned down. Emergency rally point is the bridge we crossed 2 kilometers back. Rules of engagement, Williams inquired. Sarah reviewed their briefing documents. Minimum force necessary. Guards can be neutralized, but civilian staff must be protected. No unnecessary destruction of property. Get in, get the prisoner, get out clean. They moved into position just before dawn, using darkness for concealment during the approach. Sarah's heart pounded as they neared the compound perimeter, but her mind remained focused on the mission requirements and the safety of her team. The operation began perfectly. Jessica and David reached their overwatch positions without detection and confirmed the guard positions. Marcus and Williams created a diversion at the front gate that drew 2 guards away from the rear of the compound. Sarah and Patterson penetrated the perimeter through a section of fence they had identified during reconnaissance. Inside the compound, Sarah located the prisoner in a small building near the center of the facility. The instructor actor playing the pilot was realistically portraying someone who had been injured and stressed by captivity. "Who are you?" the pilot asked suspiciously when Sarah entered the room. "Rescue team," Sarah replied, cutting the simulated restraints. "Can you walk?" "I think so. Left leg is pretty banged up, though." Sarah helped the prisoner to his feet and keyed her radio. "Package secured, moving to extraction point Alpha." But as they prepared to leave the building, everything went wrong. An instructor guard who hadn't been accounted for in their intelligence discovered them and raised an alarm. Suddenly, the compound was alive with activity as the opposing force responded to the security breach. "Contact multiple hostiles," Marcus's voice came over the radio. "Primary extraction route is compromised." Sarah had to make a split-second decision. Stick with the original plan and risk getting her team trapped, or switch to their alternate route and deal with unknown challenges. "Switching to extraction route Bravo," she transmitted. "All elements move to alternate rally point." Supporting the injured prisoner, Sarah fought her way through the compound toward the eastern perimeter. Williams laid down suppressive fire while Marcus provided cover for their movement. David and Jessica repositioned to support the new extraction route. At the eastern fence, they encountered another problem. The fence was higher and more substantial than their intelligence had indicated, and the injured prisoner couldn't climb it without assistance. Sarah had to boost him up while taking simulated fire from pursuing guards. "Almost clear," Patterson called out as he helped pull the prisoner over the fence. But just as Sarah was climbing over herself, one of the simulation devices activated, indicating that she had been hit by enemy fire. "Team leader is down," Williams shouted, rushing to her position, taking command. This was exactly the kind of leadership transition the instructors were looking for. Would the team maintain cohesion and complete the mission when their primary leader became a casualty? Sarah played her role as a wounded soldier, allowing Williams to take over while still providing advice when asked. Williams successfully led the team to the rally point with the rescued prisoner. The mission was completed, but the cost had been high. Their leader was wounded. They had used most of their ammunition, and several team members had minor injuries from the hasty extraction. "Good adaptation under pressure," Captain Morrison said during the after-action review. Leadership transition was smooth, and the team maintained discipline despite unexpected challenges. However, your intelligence preparation could have been more thorough. That guard post you missed could have gotten everyone killed in a real scenario. Sarah nodded, taking the criticism seriously. "Understood, sir. We'll incorporate more detailed reconnaissance procedures going forward." The remaining days of the exercise brought additional challenges that tested every aspect of their training. Survival scenarios when their food ran out. Navigation problems when their GPS equipment failed. Medical emergencies that required field treatment with limited supplies. Each challenge was designed to push the recruits beyond their comfort zones and reveal their true capabilities. Throughout it all, Sarah's team continued to perform well, but she could see the stress beginning to affect everyone. Marcus was becoming short-tempered. David's ankle injury was getting worse. Jessica was exhausted from serving as their primary medic for multiple casualty scenarios. Even Williams, normally unflappable, was showing signs of strain. On the final night of the exercise, as they huddled in a cold, rain-soaked hide position waiting for their last mission tasking. Sarah gathered her team for what might be their final planning session together. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she said quietly, "I want you all to know that you've been the best team I could have asked for. We've faced everything they could throw at us and we've stayed together. That's what real soldiers do." Marcus nodded, his earlier arrogance completely gone. "I've learned more in this past week than in the previous months of training, about tactics, about teamwork, about myself." "Whatever the results are," David added, "we can be proud of what we've accomplished here." The next morning would bring the final evaluation and the announcement of who had earned placement in elite units. Sarah felt confident that her team had performed well, but she also knew that competition was fierce and standards were high. Soon they would learn whether all their hard work and sacrifice had been enough to achieve their dreams. As rain continued to fall outside their shelter, Sarah reflected on how far she had come from that first day when Marcus had mocked her as a country girl. She had proven that determination, intelligence, and teamwork could overcome any prejudice or preconception. Whatever the outcome of the evaluation, she knew she had given everything she had to give. The final morning of the field exercise dawned gray and misty, with a cold drizzle that seemed to seep through every layer of clothing. Sarah's team had spent the night in a hastily constructed shelter, taking turns on watch while the others tried to get what rest they could on the damp ground. Despite the discomfort, Sarah felt alert and ready for whatever final challenge awaited them. At 600 hours, their radios crackled to life with new orders. "All teams report to Extraction Point Charlie for immediate pickup. Final mission briefing will be conducted at base camp. Timeline is critical. Transportation departs at 800 sharp." Sarah checked her map and compass, calculating the distance to the pickup point. 2 miles through rough terrain in less than 2 hours, manageable under normal circumstances. But her team was exhausted, low on supplies, and dealing with David's persistent ankle injury. "Pack it up, people," she said, already breaking down their shelter. "Light and fast, leave anything non-essential." The movement to the extraction point became a final test of the team's cohesion and determination. David struggled with his injured ankle, but Marcus and Williams took turns helping him without being asked. Jessica distributed their remaining water and energy bars to ensure everyone had enough for the march. Patterson, despite his own fatigue, took point and set a steady pace that pushed them forward without breaking anyone. They reached the pickup point with 15 minutes to spare, where they found other training teams in similar states of exhaustion and anticipation. Sarah counted the squads present and realized that several teams that had started the exercise were missing, either eliminated for performance failures or unable to complete the final movement requirements. The helicopter ride back to base camp was subdued. Everyone knew that the evaluation process was just beginning, and that all their efforts over the past week would now be analyzed and judged by instructors who had been observing their every move. Sarah found herself mentally reviewing key decisions and wondering if she could have done anything differently. Back at base camp, the successful teams were directed to a large briefing hall where senior officers and evaluation specialists waited with thick folders of assessment materials. General Patricia Hawthorne, the commanding officer of the Advanced Training Facility, stood at the podium with an expression that revealed nothing about what the evaluations had concluded. "Ladies and gentlemen," General Hawthorne began, "you have completed one of the most demanding military training programs in the world. The fact that you are sitting in this room means you have demonstrated basic competency in the skills we teach here. However, basic competency is not sufficient for assignment to special operations units." The room was completely silent except for the sound of rain against the windows. Sarah felt her heart beating faster as she waited to learn her fate. "Over the past 6 months, you have been evaluated not just on your individual performance, but on your potential to operate effectively in small teams under extreme stress. Some of you have exceeded our expectations. Others have met our standards. A few have fallen short of what we require for the most demanding assignments." General Hawthorne picked up a list from the podium. "I will now announce unit assignments for each team. Team leaders, report to the front when your name is called." Sarah watched as the first several team leaders were called forward. Some received assignments to elite special operations units, the ultimate goal they had all been working toward. Others were assigned to conventional forces or specialized support roles. The pattern wasn't immediately clear, and Sarah tried to read the expressions of the officers making the assignments. Team 7 Leader Martinez, General Hawthorne called out. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she stood and walked to the front of the room. Behind the general, she could see Captain Morrison and Sergeant Rodriguez, both watching her with neutral expressions that gave no hint about their evaluations. Your team demonstrated exceptional adaptability and cohesion throughout the exercise period, General Hawthorne said, consulting her notes. Your leadership during complex scenarios was mature and thoughtful. Your teammates showed genuine trust in your decisions and supported each other effectively under stress. Sarah waited, hardly breathing, for the final assessment. However, the general continued, there were also areas where performance did not meet our highest standards. Intelligence preparation was sometimes incomplete. Risk assessment could have been more thorough. Resource management was adequate but not optimal. Sarah's heart sank. It sounded like they were about to receive a conventional assignment rather than the special operations placement she had dreamed of. That said, General Hawthorne continued with the slightest hint of a smile, we believe your team has the potential for growth and development in a challenging environment. Team 7 is assigned to the 75th Ranger Regiment, pending completion of Ranger School. Congratulations. Sarah felt a surge of elation mixed with disbelief. The Rangers weren't the absolute elite special operations unit she had hoped for, but they were close. A highly respected formation known for demanding standards and difficult missions. More importantly, successful completion of Ranger School would open doors to even more specialized units later in her career. Thank you, ma'am, Sarah replied, struggling to keep her voice steady. We won't let you down. As she returned to her seat, she saw her teammates grinning despite their attempts to maintain military bearing. They had done it. 6 months of grueling training had paid off with assignment to one of the Army's premier units. The assignment announcements continued, with other teams receiving various placements throughout the military. Some went to special operations units, others to conventional forces, and a few were offered opportunities to repeat portions of the training program. When the process was complete, General Hawthorne dismissed the group with instructions to report for individual counseling sessions with their training officers. Sarah's session was with Captain Morrison, the officer who had observed much of her team's performance during the field exercise. His office was Spartan but comfortable, with maps and military memorabilia covering the walls. Sit down, Martinez, Morrison said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. Let's talk about your performance and what comes next. Sarah took a seat and waited for his assessment. Your technical skills are solid, Morrison began, consulting a thick file. Physical fitness, weapons proficiency, navigation, communications, all above average. Your tactical thinking is generally sound, though you sometimes tend toward overly complex solutions when simple approaches would work better. Sarah nodded, taking notes as he spoke. Where you really excel is in leadership and team dynamics, Morrison continued. You have an unusual ability to bring out the best in people around you. That business with Webb, for example, turning your primary antagonist into one of your strongest supporters. That doesn't happen by accident. Thank you, sir, Sarah replied. I learned early that teams accomplish more than individuals ever can. That's exactly the right attitude for Ranger School, Morrison said. Because I'll be honest with you, what you've been through here is going to seem like summer camp compared to what's waiting for you at Fort Benning. Ranger School has a failure rate that hovers around 50%. It's designed to push people past their breaking point and see who has the character to keep going. Sarah felt a familiar mixture of excitement and nervousness. What should I expect, sir? Morrison leaned back in his chair. 61 days of the most challenging military training in the world. Sleep deprivation, food restriction, constant stress, and leadership challenges that will test everything you think you know about yourself. The physical demands are severe, but the mental pressure is even worse. He pulled out a training schedule and showed it to Sarah. 3 phases, first at Fort Benning focusing on basic ranger skills, then mountain operations in Georgia, and finally swamp training in Florida. Each phase eliminates candidates who can't meet the standards. Sir, is there any specific advice you can give me about preparation? Physical fitness is crucial, obviously, Morrison replied. But more important is mental preparation. You'll be functioning on minimal sleep and food while making complex decisions under extreme stress. The candidates who succeed are usually those who can maintain their composure and continue thinking clearly even when their bodies are shutting down. Sarah thought about the challenges she had faced growing up on the farm, working through exhaustion during harvest season, dealing with equipment failures at critical moments, managing complex logistics with limited resources. "I think I understand, sir." "I believe you do," Morrison said. "Your rural background actually gives you some advantages that city kids don't have. You're used to physical hardship, you understand that things break and plans change, and you know how to keep working when conditions are miserable." He closed her file and leaned forward. "One more thing, Martinez. When you get to Ranger School, some people are going to underestimate you because of your background. Let them. Use their preconceptions as an advantage while you quietly outperform them." Sarah smiled. "Yes, sir, I've had some practice with that already." The next 2 weeks at the training facility were devoted to preparation for their new assignments. Sarah's team spent time on additional weapons training, advanced medical procedures, and specialized skills they would need as rangers. The intensity was lower than during the main training program, but the focus was sharper. Everything they learned would be directly applicable to their new roles. During this period, Sarah also received some unexpected news. Marcus approached her one evening as she was reviewing training manuals in the common area. "Hey, Sarah," he said, sitting down across from her. "I wanted to let you know I've decided to put in for a transfer." Sarah looked up in surprise. "A transfer? But we just got assigned to the Rangers. That's what we've been working toward for 6 months." Marcus nodded uncomfortably. "I know, and I'm grateful for everything you've taught me and how much you've helped me grow. But I've been thinking a lot about what I really want to do with my military career." "What are you considering?" "Military intelligence," Marcus replied. "I think I'd be more valuable analyzing threats and planning operations than carrying out direct action missions. Captain Morrison helped me understand that there are different ways to serve, and they're all important." Sarah studied his face and saw that he had given this decision serious thought. "If that's what you think is right for you, then I support it. You've proven that you can handle anything the military throws at you." "Thanks," Marcus said with obvious relief. "I was worried you'd think I was backing down from a challenge." "Not at all," Sarah assured him. "It takes wisdom to understand your own strengths and find the right place to use them. The intelligence community needs good people who understand how operations work at the ground level." They talked for another hour about his plans and the opportunities available in military intelligence. Sarah realized that Marcus had indeed changed dramatically from the arrogant city boy who had mocked her on their first day. He had become thoughtful, self-aware, and committed to serving effectively rather than just advancing his own career. The following week brought individual departure dates as team members left for their various new assignments. David was heading to a signals intelligence unit where his technical skills would be highly valued. Jessica had been offered a position with a special operations medical unit that supported multiple elite formations. Williams and Patterson were continuing to Ranger School along with Sarah. On her final evening at the training facility, Sarah walked around the base one last time, reflecting on all that had happened over the past 6 months. The obstacle courses, the barracks, the training areas, they all held memories of challenges overcome and friendships formed. Sergeant Rodriguez found her near the rappel tower, where she had first demonstrated her ability to handle heights and technical challenges. "Thinking deep thoughts, Martinez?" he asked, walking up beside her. "Just remembering how scared I was the first time I had to go down that tower," Sarah replied. "Seems like a long time ago now." "Fear is a good thing," Rodriguez said. "It keeps you sharp and makes you careful. The people who aren't afraid of anything are usually the ones who get themselves and their teammates killed." They stood quietly for a moment, watching the sun set behind the distant mountains. "You know," Rodriguez continued, "I've been training soldiers for 15 years, and I don't often see transformation like what happened with your team. You took a group of individuals with completely different backgrounds and turned them into something special." "They were all good people to begin with," Sarah said. "They just needed a chance to show it." "Maybe, but it takes the right kind of leader to create the environment where that can happen. Don't lose that gift when you get to Ranger School. The military needs leaders who care more about their people than about their own advancement." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility that would come with her new role. "I'll do my best, Sergeant." I know you will, Rodriguez replied. And Martinez, when you're struggling through the swamps of Florida wondering why you ever thought this was a good idea, remember that you've already proven you have what it takes. The girl who got mocked on her first day for being from the country went on to lead one of the best teams I've seen. Don't forget that story. The next morning, Sarah boarded a transport plane bound for Fort Benning, Georgia, where Ranger School would begin in just 3 days. As the aircraft lifted off, she looked down at the training facility that had transformed her from an ambitious farm girl into a confident military leader. She pulled out a small notebook and began writing a letter to her parents, trying to find words to explain how much she had grown and learned. The challenges ahead at Ranger School would be even more demanding, but she felt ready to face them. More importantly, she felt confident in her ability to help others face them as well. Wherever her military career led from here, Sarah knew that the lessons learned at the advanced training facility would stay with her forever. She had proven to herself and others that determination and character could overcome any prejudice or obstacle. Now it was time to prove it again at an even higher level. The plane banked toward the south, carrying her toward the next chapter of her journey. Below, the landscape gradually changed from the rocky hills of the training facility to the rolling farmland of her childhood. Sarah smiled, thinking about how that rural background had given her strengths she was still discovering. Soon she would be testing those strengths against the legendary challenges of Ranger School. She was ready. Fort Benning, Georgia, sprawled across the horizon like a small city dedicated entirely to the art of making soldiers. Sarah stepped off the bus at 500 hours on a humid Monday morning, joining nearly 200 other candidates who had come from across the military to attempt Ranger School. The air was thick with moisture and anticipation as the new arrivals formed up in the pre-dawn darkness. The Ranger Training Brigade cadre waited for them with expressions that suggested the next 61 days would test everything these candidates thought they knew about themselves. Sarah had heard stories about Ranger School since she was old enough to understand what the military was, but standing here now, she realized that no amount of preparation could fully ready someone for what lay ahead. "Welcome to Ranger School," announced Command Sergeant Major Thompson, a weathered veteran whose uniform displayed more combat decorations than Sarah had ever seen on one person. "Some of you think you're here because you're tough. Some think you're here because you're smart. Some think you're here because you're special. You're all wrong." The formation stood in perfect silence as Thompson continued his welcome speech. "You're here because the United States Army needs leaders who can function effectively under conditions that would break ordinary people. Over the next 9 weeks, we're going to find out which of you have the character and competence to earn the Ranger tab." Sarah felt the familiar mixture of excitement and nervousness that had become her constant companion during challenging training. Around her, she could sense similar emotions from the other candidates. Everyone here had already proven themselves in their respective units, but Ranger School was a different kind of test entirely. "Ranger School has 3 phases," Thompson continued. "First, we'll teach you the basic skills and evaluate your ability to learn under stress. Then we'll take you to the mountains and see how you perform when you're cold, tired, and everything hurts. Finally, we'll drop you in a swamp and find out what you're really made of when conditions become truly miserable." The sergeant major paused to let his words sink in. "The training is designed to push you past your breaking point. We will deprive you of sleep. We will restrict your food. We will place you in leadership positions where failure means letting down your teammates. Some of you will quit. Others will be eliminated for failing to meet our standards. The question is, which category will you fall into?" Sarah's jaw set with determination. She had not come this far to quit when things got difficult. "One final point," Thompson concluded. "Ranger School is not about individual achievement. It's about developing leaders who can take care of their people under the worst possible circumstances. If you think this is about proving how tough you personally are, you've already missed the point." The first week of Ranger Assessment Phase, or RAP Week, lived up to its reputation as a brutal introduction to what lay ahead. Physical fitness tests, obstacle courses, water survival, and combat skills evaluations eliminated nearly 20% of the initial class before the real training even began. Sarah excelled at most of the physical challenges, but she quickly realized that success in Ranger School required more than individual performance. During the peer evaluations that followed each exercise, candidates rated each other on leadership potential and teamwork. Those who focused solely on their own success found themselves receiving low marks from their fellow students. The academic portion proved equally challenging. Classes on small unit tactics, patrolling procedures, and mission planning were conducted at an accelerated pace with limited time for study. Sarah's engineering background helped her understand the technical aspects quickly, but memorizing the detailed procedures required hours of review each night when she should have been sleeping. "The key is efficient study," explained Captain Rodriguez, no relation to her former drill sergeant, during a brief break between classes. "You can't afford to waste time on material you already understand. Focus your energy on the areas where you're weakest." Sarah found herself naturally gravitating toward study groups with other candidates who shared her serious approach to the training. Among them was Lieutenant James Patterson, a West Point graduate whose careful preparation and collaborative leadership style earned respect from both instructors and peers. "Martinez, right?" Patterson said one evening as they reviewed patrol procedures in the barracks. "I remember hearing about your performance at the advanced training facility. Sounds like you know something about leading under pressure." Sarah nodded. "Every day here feels like a test of everything I learned there, but the pace is much more intense." "Wait until we get to the field phases," added Staff Sergeant Williams, an experienced infantryman who was attending Ranger School to improve his promotion prospects. "I've talked to guys who have been through it. They say the classroom work is the easy part." The first field exercise came after 2 weeks of classroom preparation. Sarah's patrol was tasked with conducting a reconnaissance mission in the Georgia woods, and she found herself appointed as patrol leader for the operation. The appointment was both an honor and a tremendous responsibility. Leadership positions in Ranger School were carefully observed and graded, with failure resulting in elimination from the program. "Okay, people," Sarah said as her 12-person patrol gathered for mission planning. "We have 6 hours to plan, prepare, and execute a reconnaissance of this objective. Our mission is to gather specific intelligence without being detected by the opposing force." She spread the operational maps on the ground and began walking through her initial assessment. Terrain analysis shows multiple approach routes, but only 2 that offer adequate concealment for a patrol our size. Weather forecast calls for possible rain, which could help mask our movement but might also create visibility problems. The patrol members nodded, taking notes and asking relevant questions. Sarah was pleased to see that everyone seemed focused and professional, though she knew the real test would come when they were tired, hungry, and operating in the field. Planning consumed 4 hours as they developed detailed routes, contingency plans, and communication procedures. Sarah insisted on multiple rehearsals of critical tasks, having learned from her previous training that complex operations fell apart quickly without proper practice. The mission itself began at 2,200 hours under overcast skies that provided excellent concealment, but made navigation challenging. Sarah led her patrol through 2 miles of dense forest, using compass and pace count to stay on their planned route. The opposing force had positioned security teams throughout the area, requiring careful movement and frequent security halts. At the objective area, Sarah split her patrol into observation teams and established a schedule for gathering the required intelligence. They needed photographs of specific buildings, counts of personnel and equipment, and details about security procedures. The work required patience and attention to detail while remaining undetected by roving patrols. "Movement to the south," whispered Specialist Davis, one of her observation team leaders. "Patrol of 4 heading toward our primary observation post." Sarah made a quick decision to shift positions, moving her teams to alternate locations they had identified during planning. The movement was executed smoothly, and they continued gathering intelligence without detection. After 6 hours of observation, Sarah's patrol had collected all the required information and was preparing to extract from the area when they encountered an unexpected challenge. The opposing force had apparently detected signs of their presence and was conducting an organized search of the area. "We're going to have to modify our extraction route," Sarah told her assistant patrol leader. "The original route takes us directly through their search pattern." She made a rapid assessment of alternative options and selected a more circuitous route that would take longer but avoid the areas being actively searched. The decision required her patrol to move quickly to reach their pickup point on time, but it successfully avoided contact with the opposing force. "Good adaptation under pressure," her evaluating instructor noted during the after-action review. Your planning was thorough, your execution was professional, and you maintained mission focus when the situation changed. However, your initial route selection could have been more conservative. In a real scenario, that opposing force patrol might have been a genuine threat that could have compromised your entire mission. Sarah accepted the feedback gratefully, understanding that the instructors were trying to develop her judgment as well as her technical skills. Every exercise was designed to present realistic challenges that required quick thinking and sound decision-making. The weeks that followed brought increasingly complex scenarios that tested every aspect of small unit leadership. Sarah found herself rotating through different positions, sometimes as patrol leader, sometimes as assistant leader, sometimes as a team member following someone else's orders. Each role provided different learning opportunities and different types of stress. During one particularly challenging exercise, Sarah's patrol was tasked with conducting a night assault on a fortified position. The mission required precise coordination between multiple teams and perfect timing to succeed. Sarah was appointed as the assault team leader, responsible for the most dangerous phase of the operation. Timing is everything on this one, she explained to her team during rehearsals. We have a 4-minute window between the supporting fires lifting and the enemy reaction force arriving. If we're late getting to the objective, we'll be caught in the open. If we're early, we'll be caught in our own supporting fires. The assault went almost perfectly. Sarah's team reached their assigned positions exactly on schedule, conducted a coordinated attack that neutralized the objective, and extracted successfully before the enemy could react effectively. The entire operation was completed without a single casualty. Outstanding leadership, her instructor commented afterward. You maintained control of your team under stress, adapted to changing conditions, and accomplished the mission efficiently. This is exactly the kind of performance we're looking for. As the first phase of Ranger School neared its end, Sarah felt increasingly confident in her abilities. The physical demands were challenging but manageable. The academic material was complex but comprehensible, and the leadership opportunities were demanding but rewarding. She was beginning to believe that she might actually succeed in earning her Ranger tab. That confidence was shaken during her final exercise of the first phase. Sarah was appointed as overall patrol leader for a complex mission that involved multiple objectives and tight time constraints. Everything that could go wrong seemed to go wrong: equipment failures, navigation errors, communication breakdowns, and simulated casualties that disrupted her carefully planned timeline. This is where leaders are made, she reminded herself as problems multiplied around her. Anyone can lead when everything goes according to plan. She adapted quickly to each new challenge, reorganizing her patrol structure to accommodate simulated casualties, adjusting her timeline to deal with equipment problems, and finding alternative solutions when her original plans proved unworkable. But the cumulative stress was enormous, and she could see that her patrol members were beginning to show signs of frustration and fatigue. Martinez, one of her team leaders, called out during a brief halt. The men are starting to lose confidence. We've had nothing but problems for the past 4 hours, and morale is getting pretty low. Sarah gathered her team leaders for a quick conference. I know this has been a tough day, she told them. Nothing has gone the way we planned, and everyone is tired and frustrated, but this is exactly when leadership matters most. Our job is to take care of our people and complete the mission, regardless of how difficult things get. She looked each team leader in the eye. I need you to get back to your teams and remind them why we're here. We're not training to be fair-weather soldiers. We're training to be the people others can count on when everything falls apart. The pep talk seemed to work. Her team leaders returned to their squads with renewed energy, and the patrol completed its remaining objectives successfully despite continued challenges. Sarah's leadership during the crisis earned high marks from her evaluators, but more importantly, it earned respect from her fellow candidates. I don't know how you stayed so calm, Patterson said after the exercise concluded. I was watching you deal with one disaster after another, and you never seemed to get rattled. Sarah thought about his observation. I grew up on a farm, she replied. Equipment breaks, weather changes, animals get sick, markets crash. You learn that problems are just puzzles waiting to be solved. Getting upset about them doesn't help anyone. As the first phase concluded, Sarah learned that she would be continuing to the mountain phase of training in northern Georgia. Her performance had been consistently strong, and her peer evaluations indicated that other candidates respected her leadership abilities and wanted to serve under her command. But she also learned something else that gave her pause. During a quiet moment before departing for the mountains, she overheard a conversation between two instructors discussing the candidate's performance. "Martinez has been impressive so far," one was saying. "Strong technical skills, good leadership instincts, handles stress well, but the mountains are going to be a different kind of test. We'll see if her confidence holds up when she's really suffering." "What about the rumors I've heard about her background?" the other instructor asked. "Something about coming from some advanced training program where she stood out." "That's part of what interests me," the first instructor replied. "She's gotten this far on talent and preparation, but Ranger School isn't just about being smart and tough. It's about character. We'll find out what she's really made of when she's been cold and hungry for 2 weeks straight." Sarah realized that her reputation had preceded her to Ranger School, but that reputation would only get her so far. The mountain phase would strip away all the advantages of preparation and force her to rely on pure determination and character. As the bus loaded with candidates pulled away from Fort Benning toward the mountains of northern Georgia, Sarah stared out the window at the passing landscape and prepared herself mentally for the next level of challenge. The first phase had been demanding but manageable. The mountain phase would push her further than she had ever been pushed before. She pulled out a small notebook and began writing another letter to her parents, trying to put into words what she was learning about herself and about leadership. The girl who had been mocked as a country girl on her first day of advanced training was now earning respect from some of the most demanding instructors in the military. But the hardest tests still lay ahead. Soon she would discover whether all her training and determination were enough to earn the right to be called a ranger. The mountains of northern Georgia greeted Sarah and her fellow ranger candidates with a cold rain that seemed to penetrate every layer of clothing they wore. Camp Merrill, the remote training facility where the mountain phase would take place, looked more like a survival camp than a military installation. Rough wooden buildings, muddy trails, and obstacle courses that seemed designed by someone with a cruel sense of humor stretched across the mountainous terrain. "Welcome to the mountains," announced Major Collins, the officer in charge of the mountain phase. "For the next 3 weeks, you will learn to operate in conditions that most people would consider uninhabitable. You will be cold, wet, hungry, and exhausted almost constantly. Some of you will discover that you have reserves of strength you never knew existed. Others will discover that they have reached their limits." Sarah stood with the remaining candidates. Their number had dwindled from nearly 200 to fewer than 150 during the first phase. Each person who remained had already proven their basic competency, but the mountain phase would test something deeper: the ability to function when physical and mental resources were nearly exhausted. "Mountain operations require different skills than what you learned at Benning," Major Collins continued. "Navigation becomes more complex when visibility is limited and terrain features can be deceptive. Movement takes longer and requires more energy. Weather becomes a constant enemy that can kill you if you make mistakes." The major gestured toward the forbidding peaks that surrounded the camp. "Over the next 21 days, you will conduct operations in terrain that ranges from gentle slopes to near-vertical cliff faces. You will learn mountaineering techniques, cold weather survival, and high-altitude patrol operations. All of this while operating on minimal food and sleep." Sarah felt a familiar tingle of anticipation mixed with apprehension. The physical challenges would be severe, but she had grown up working outdoors in all-weather conditions. More concerning was the psychological pressure that would come from weeks of accumulated stress and fatigue. Training began immediately with a brutal introduction to mountaineering skills. Rock climbing, rappelling, and rope work had to be mastered quickly because they would be essential for survival in the coming weeks. Sarah's farm background had given her good balance and comfort with heights, but the technical skills required for military mountaineering were completely new to her. "The key to climbing is efficient movement," explained Staff Sergeant Torres, a grizzled mountain warfare instructor who seemed equally comfortable on vertical rock faces or level ground. "Strength will only get you so far. Technique and mental focus are what keep you alive when you're exhausted and the weather turns bad." Sarah watched carefully as Torres demonstrated proper climbing positions and rope handling procedures. Every movement had to be precise. A single mistake could result in serious injury or death, even during training exercises with safety equipment. Her first climb was on a relatively easy rock face, but even that proved challenging when attempted while wearing full military gear and carrying a heavy pack. The additional weight threw off her balance and made every movement more difficult. By the time she reached the top, her arms were shaking from exertion and her lungs were burning from the effort. "Not bad for a first attempt," Tors called up to her. "But you're fighting the rock instead of working with it. Rock climbing is like dancing. You have to find the rhythm and flow with the natural movement patterns." The metaphor helped Sarah understand what she had been doing wrong. On her second climb, she focused on smooth, efficient movements rather than trying to power through with brute strength. The improvement was immediate and dramatic. She completed a more difficult route with less effort and better control. "Much better," Tors noted as she rappelled back down. "You're starting to think like a climber instead of just trying to muscle your way up the wall." The academic portion of mountain training was equally demanding. Navigation in mountainous terrain required understanding of how topographic features affected compass readings and GPS accuracy. Weather analysis became critical for planning operations that might be affected by sudden storms or temperature changes. Even basic tasks like cooking and water purification had to be adapted for high-altitude conditions. Sarah found herself studying late into the night, trying to absorb information that could literally be a matter of life and death in the field. The combination of physical exhaustion from daily training and mental fatigue from intensive academic work created a constant state of stress that tested everyone's ability to maintain focus and performance. The first major field exercise began after 1 week of preparation. Sarah's patrol was tasked with conducting a reconnaissance mission that required them to climb to an observation post on a mountain peak, gather intelligence for 24 hours, and then extract through challenging terrain while avoiding detection by an opposing force. "Weather forecast shows possible snow at higher elevations," Sarah briefed her.